Good evening and welcome to the January 29th Board of Education meeting. Tonight is the second of two nights of special hearings for public input on the superintendent's proposed budget. The next step after tonight is that we are going to have a special meeting next Monday at the high school, or here? High school.
High school.
To vote on the budget to move forward to the Board of Finance. We did have a very productive meeting, I think, last night. Heard from several parents and others relating to issues like all-day kindergarten, special education, and some other items. And so we have not quite the public attendance tonight as we had last night, but we will hear from anybody who would like to address us. So, Ms. Beckett, would you like to address us?
Thank you, Mr. Bloss. My name is Kim Beckett. I live at 6 Greenwood Lane, and I am the parent of an 18-year-old son at the high school receiving special education services. As you very well know, tonight I probably can't speak too specifically about the budget because it's only been posted online for the last 24 hours. Jason, you will not be beaten up tonight, so relax. I did have the opportunity, however, to sit down with Dr. Freeman earlier this month to talk about a number of things in the budget. And he told me, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, he told me that his budget includes funding for the continuation for the Bright Connections program, the autism program at Lakes. It includes funding for the Strive program, which is the new 18 to 21-year-old program in collaboration with the towns of Madison and Clinton. It also includes an alternative school for kids at the high school, and there is funding also for the transition coordinator, who is currently at 15 hours per week, for her position to become full-time but with added responsibility. And I think you all know me well enough that I am sort of looked at as a watchdog for special education. And I know that I'm speaking to you as the choir, but clearly the message you have here is a superintendent who is a progressive thinker. He understands that special education costs are going to do nothing but increase. We watch them go up every year to everyone's complaint. So he is trying to be proactive and do something about it. The tuition line item in 2007-2008 was approximately $1.5 million, and this year it is doubled. Dr. Freeman is somebody who's trying to help students with disabilities, as he's trying to help all students in Guilford Public Schools, but he's also helping the town of Guilford create a foundation to keep our students local, which most of us believe is a win-win situation. Parents are more than pleased that their children will be close by, and our educational and transportation costs will be reduced. In the past, we have heard too often, it's not a good time to implement the new plan. Back in 2007, we thought we had a tough road, but now we're wrestling with an alligator. Dr. Freeman's budget clearly begins to pave the road to a resolution. Last night you heard a parent speak whose daughter was in the Bright Connections program, which just got started this year. I believe that she told you that prior to being in the Bright Connections program, she felt that there was no doubt her daughter would have to be outplaced at some point. The parent was even skeptical that if her daughter was placed in Bright Outcomes, what the expectations and the outcome of the students who are enrolled in the program. But after just a short period, she saw the difference in her daughter's learning. It was a very intensive type of training. She and other parents have spoken to me very highly about the energetic and knowledgeable staff who are information and resolution-seeking individuals. So kudos to you, Dr. Freeman, for getting this program off the ground when we heard so many years it can't be done. I'm hopeful that I can say next year that Strive and the alternative programs were successful as well. One area of concern that I did speak to Dr. Freeman about was that of technology. And really specifically for special education. We have teachers and staff who have their hands full, and if they're not technically savvy, then their teachers are, just trying to get by. We've had so many of our students have assistive technology assessments, but we don't have a way to really implement what needs to happen next. I understand that there is a new staff member that would serve under Kevin Mitchell, who would be more involved with training teachers and staff, and who would be more apt at knowing what's available out there and making recommendations as a student gets identified for a need. This is a step in the right direction, but I hope that we can enhance this even more so next year. So in the end, we do have a budget that is a good one, and it really should be passed and moved forward to finance with our blessing. Thank you.
All right, any other members of the public want to add anything? No? Okay, we don't have any takers at this point. Why don't we, traditionally at the second meeting, if there are not a lot of people here, sometimes we do start to talk about some of the issues, some of the justifications for why you've included certain things, why you haven't included certain things, and so I think we can, with the board's consent, we can maybe use our time productively tonight and at least start talking about what we're going to ultimately vote on Monday. I think just in terms of framing the issues, one of the major issues obviously is all-day kindergarten. You have not included that within the budget this year, although I think you've made very clear that you think that is a good idea and an idea that is going to happen in Guilford.
I think it's absolutely something I'll be bringing back before this Board of Education, if not in 12 months, certainly in 24 months. I think that it's a direction that we're going. I think it's a direction that Hartford's going to continue to encourage, if not mandate. I do think there's an intuitive connection between the full-day kindergarten and the direction Common Core is taking us. So yes, I'm confident that I'll be back in front of this board with a request for full-day kindergarten in not too distant future.
Could I ask do you think there's any synergy between full-day kindergarten and building the local capacity for special needs? I guess we heard from one parent that they felt that their child in particular would benefit from that, but by adding all-day kindergarten, do you potentially increase the opportunity to keep kids in district, or is that?
Yes, I do. And in fact, when we looked for research this year, one of the places that I tried to look was that if we couldn't identify research that showed that students would be achieving at a higher level overall, I was looking to see if there were indications that students who had exposure to full-day kindergarten had lower rates of identification for special education needs, because you've got them for a longer time, you can do more intervention, and you can do more preventative work. Again, it seems like an intuitive truth to me, but I couldn't find really concrete research that supported it. It's one of the areas that we want to continue looking.
We have already, do we not at times have a select few of our kids in kindergarten, yes, basically twice,
yes,
so that they're in all day?
Yes. To a degree, that creates a challenge for the teacher, because you don't want that child to just be doing the same lessons twice every day. Right. But yes, we do have students who spend the full day with us. We could probably design that better if we looked at the full day for everybody. But yes, the answer is yes.
And I could add on to that. For many of those students, they have the regular kindergarten, and then they might have a lot of their associated services, whether it be speech and language or OT or PT or other services that they need in the other half of the day. So it's not like they're doing twice kindergarten,
right,
but they're integrating a lot of other supports that they need into that program. So they are with us a full day, but they may not be doing kindergarten twice.
Maybe I could ask about the Break Connections program, which was a very nice comment last night about, and I've heard other things about the success of the program, and I think the board certainly wants to continue to support that. One of the items in the budget, I think, is 3 additional paraprofessionals for that program. but that's sort of competing against the Futures report, which also kind of stated that we have a lot, maybe a lot, I don't know, heavy amount of paras compared to other districts. And sometimes it seems like maybe, when we do out placements or have IEPs where somebody moves on, that the paras are not necessarily reduced. Is it, I guess, I'm just wondering if, without adding more paras, it's still possible to support the Bright Connections program?
I think it is, and I think you're anticipating some of the suggestions that I'm bringing to the table tonight. Last year, our administrative team, our leadership team, spent time with outside trainers. We spent time talking about different philosophies, different ways to think about using paraprofessionals. Dr. Johnson, I know, has been working with PPT facilitators to think about paraprofessionals who could be used in support roles, talking about periods of time or areas within a student's day that need to be supported by an additional adult, rather than thinking of paras in a simpler one-to-one association. I asked Dr. Johnson if we leveled the paraprofessional staffing this year and didn't increase by 3. Did he think that he would still be able to meet the needs of Bright Connections? Bright Connections will grow, and that program will need additional paras. But could we manage with the existing number? And when we talk about increasing by 3, it's probably worth noting the overall size. We're talking about a staffing level of 83, currently changing to 86. We're not talking about 3 changing to 6. Dr. Johnson believed that he could. I met with Mrs. Brown earlier today, went over some of those staffing levels, and asked her, as she transitions in, if she felt confident that between closing of this year and the opening of next year, if she'd have a staffing handle on that. And I'm going to suggest tonight that we adjust the budget by those 3 positions, maintain the level, and that has come from the conversations that we've been having as we've presented. I think we will need to support that program, but I think we can look at the overall figures, look at students who may be graduating out, and do it without the increase of those 3 positions. You anticipated one of my comments.
Well, Mr. Hoey, when we met with the Board of Finance, asked a question at the end of the meeting, if there were to be reductions made, where would they come from? And which is what he asks every year, which you should anticipate that moving forward. But I think Dr. Freeman has worked out a list of if he were to, these are not necessarily recommendations, but that at least there are alternatives, and maybe we should look at that.
Yeah, I'm happy to share them. The quick answer to Mr. Hoey's question was that there's only 2 areas that I do think we could make significant reductions. They would be in maintenance or in site improvements or in staffing. Our budget, and we haven't spent a lot of time focusing on this, our budget comes in very lean. We had very minimal increases in benefit lines. We've had very minimal increases in discretionary spending in areas of supplies and materials. To make a significant decrease, you need to look at staffing. There are significant suggestions for new investments this year, and so knowing that we would have this conversation, I took the liberty of creating, in a rough priority order, suggestions that I would make. We have had continuing conversation about renewal of our bus contract. If we choose to renew the bus contract at the level of the verbal agreement that we have from STA, we would be able to reduce this budget in front of the board by $25,000. We've been able to negotiate below the level that we built into this budget when we began the first draft of this budget. So there's a savings of $25,000 in that area. For the second year, we have made an effort to make a significant investment in the site improvement line. We increased that line by $240,000 last year. We have suggested in this proposal that we increase it by an additional $100,000. It would bring the site improvement line to approximately $526,000. To reduce that by $25,000 is still a significant investment. It brings us up to the $500,000 mark that we have talked about in the facilities committee as being the level we'd like to be at. So I don't want to portray that as a compromise, but it's a place where I think we could make a reduction. And then, Dr. Moore, the suggestion that you made about those paraprofessional positions, I had added to this list as well. And in fact, that figure represents a salary savings. There would be an associated benefit savings that I failed to put on the list at an average of about $10,000 a year for benefits. We could add another $30,000 to that line. So that would be a projected reduction that we're looking at of approximately $140,000 if we stopped at that line.
Dr. John Ireland is not here tonight, and he'll be here maybe in an hour. And I think he might speak a little bit on the facility side. I mean, we had this discussion in the subcommittee. I do think it's really important that we, pay attention to the site improvements line in the operating budget in particular, so that we don't get into the situation of trying to fix things with bonding and try to reach more of a steady state. I think one of the important things, though, is to make sure that we do have enough in that budget. It seems like that's the thing that when things get tight,
yes,
we're looking at cutting into, and that's happening this year from what I can tell. I mean, we're optimistic maybe we can find a little bit more money, but from what I understand, I mean, this is the conversation we had a year ago, is that we need to increase the site improvements, but then they're frozen at this point. So, I'm less than enthusiastic about reducing that line even further, especially when we've increased it but not really been able to spend it.
Right. I'm not enthusiastic about any of the suggestions I'm making right now. I'd like to be able to maintain all of these. I will note, you're right, we have been holding on, and we have in fact informed Mr. Grinham today that we've thawed $50,000 of what was previously frozen. As we continue to monitor that line, and as we get closer to the school year, we will be releasing those dollars. So of the, I want to say $425,000 that was originally in the site improvement line for this year, we've spent approximately $97,000 to date. We have released another $50,000 that we will begin, and as we get closer to the end of the year and as we continue to track our spending, we will continue to release portions of that so that we're sort of balancing project work and keeping a track of that as we move forward. I agree, having money in that line is important so that we properly maintain the buildings. It is spending good money to avoid spending bad money later. But again, I'll point out that even at that reduction, it would show an increase in that line item this year of $75,000 to take us from 425 to 500,000.
It's a decrease of the increase.
Yes, we would be decreasing the increase. We would still be investing more in that line next year than we have this year. $75,000 next year over this year's current dollar amount, if we accept that reduction in this proposal.
The caveat would then be if we are not able to take and spend what we have in this year's budget because other things eat it up, then we're even further behind, and hence the importance of keeping this in here stronger right now. And the other piece of it, we'll be having some bonding money that the committee is working on aimed toward security type improvements in light of the situation that happened in Newtown and otherwise to address. And not all those improvements and change should be bonded, or probably are the right type of expense to be bonded over a long period of time, as opposed to taking out of our site improvement budget. So there's another thing that is different than what we've experienced before, and another light on that aspect of it. So that'd be one that I would hold off on striking out at this point in time myself as well.
Well, I think in fairness, we can make a case for all 7 of these.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and there may be, that's Paul's list, and other questions that we have that could identify other areas that we can discuss too.
So I gather this is in decreasing.
Yeah, this
priority
is.
one.
I would cut from the top of the page down, and for what it's worth, what you notice as you make it from the top half to the bottom half of the list is that I have chunked what I view as the investments in in those three priorities. Essentially, the investments in instruction, the investments that go into building our ability to educate more of our students here at home in district and avoid outplacements, the ability to support the implementation of the new evaluation systems for both teachers and principals, and most importantly, the ability to implement well and for all students the Common Core state standards. I have bundled those investments in the bottom of this list, hoping to be able to make reductions in those top lines. They're balanced reductions. We're not talking about level funding site improvement this year. And I believe with the addition of the benefits, taking the top three would bring us down to about a 3.01 or 2 budget request, I think, if I'm doing my rough mental math.
Were the benefits, Ms. Trudeau, were the benefits included in the gross budget numbers? In other words, if we're subtracting, we should make sure that they were
lining up.
Yes.
Okay, all right, so then that is reasonable to assume a $10,000
Right.
per position. Okay, so that would really be a savings of $89,000. Okay.
On another, well, stepping off of this page, I have questions regarding our better implementation of accounting POs and software needs in order to take and do that, and where in here are the allocations for software contracts for district-wide for Munis, and what is in there for recognizing that we have some changes there you're thinking about?
The first level of change that we want to do is we want to take full advantage of the software packages that we have. Munis provides functionality that we're not currently taking advantage of. Munis would allow us to do, I'm going to say these very broadly, Munis would allow us to do paperless budgeting from central office to the buildings. Principals would be able to track their budgets in the budgeting software. Munis would allow us to do paperless purchase orders and purchase requests. So we don't have a request in here for a new business office software. We want to first fully utilize what we have. We might be coming forward in a future year with requests. There are software requests around data, a data package that we will need for the evaluation systems. There are software requests to continue with the new IEP software that we purchased this year. There are some other software components, but I don't think there's a new HR office, business office suite that we've proposed this year.
So it's, as far as training to step up for what people need to do to implement existing package opportunities, is that then just an allocation of personnel time with no direct budget impact, only
We
allocation of time?
include, for example, the Munis training, all that in our district professional development, because we do have to periodically go out, get updates, so that is a part of the district PD. Any kind of training that has to go along with Munis or any of the, other software programs that we have. We also have included Naviance software package, which is the student success plans that are required by the state for all students in grades 6 through 12, and so that is also an additional software piece.
And there's a new nursing software suite as well, and we provided training for that just this last week. So you're right, the training costs are embedded in personnel time and in professional development.
Okay.
Any others?
We've actually incurred some expense in this year to purchase some of the software that is needed to start moving towards those items that we've talked about, the decentralized entry of purchase orders. And we've increased the amount of the annual cost for Munis in this budget that will cover those expenses going forward.
Is that under purchase services or
It's district software.
district software?
It's under software.
Okay, and then that is what's then tab then?
It's under the supplies.
Supplies, okay.
And then it should be software under there. Our intention at this point is to train current staff and use the current staff to train additional district personnel. So we're not going to do a large expenditure for training that is going to be done in-house by our own people.
Okay, so the proposed budget of $155,000 for district computer software includes those things we just talked about?
Yes.
And that's up $34,000
Yes.
this year? Okay.
I have a question, which probably has a very obvious answer, but I need to ask it anyway. We have, under the technology plan, $80,000 for Guilford High School mobile technology, which is a good thing. But my question is, why is that not in FF&E for the new high school?
I might need to get back to you. I may need to go back to the high school sheets and see specifically what we're looking at in there. I think part of it is not wanting to wait. I do know that this budget has more tablet readers than any budget that we've put forward before, but I don't know specifically if that's what is in there. Linda, I don't know if you...
Is that in capital or something?
It's under the technology plan?
It's mobile labs that can be used right now, and it's to update some of the laptops that are already 5 years old. And so we're shifting and replacing the ones on the mobile lab, and then taking those that are been around in the district for 5 years and shifting those to other places. So it's updating the mobile labs in the classrooms, and it's stuff that needs to be replaced now, and it will move forward into the new building. It's not permanent hardware.
The FF&E line in the construction budget traditionally doesn't include end-user stations, and in our budget, like many others, doesn't include all new end-user stations. Much of the FF&E when it comes to technology is going to be for the network, the infrastructure, the support locations. There may be items like projectors. There will be items like interactive boards, the wireless routers. So it's not unusual to continue the computer purchases and move them over with us rather than to wait and purchase all new user stations in the FF&E. And in fact, ECF often questions if you're purchasing computers as part of the FF&E because it became a habit that districts would hold off for 2 or 3 years on technology investments and then purchase a number of the computers. It's fallen out of vogue in the last several years. They're much more cautious about it in Hartford.
Also, just as a reminder, remember when we talked about Smarter Balanced? It's going to be a computer adaptive test, and we've had to complete several readiness surveys for Smarter Balanced, and they are saying that machines that are older than 5 years probably will not work, will not be sufficient, and so we need to make sure that we are keeping up with our replacement schedule and not wait.
Of the new positions, can any of those do all, first, I'm intrigued that you put the literacy coaches below the tech integration specialists, which I'm trying to avoid making eye contact with Dr. Keene right now, because I'm sure she may not rank them exactly the same way as you would. But what is your thought about that ranking, or that prioritization? And the other question is, do all of these have to be full-time positions? Or can any of those, the math teacher, I understand, no, probably not. But is there any middle ground? Is there a way to do either one literacy coach or half of a tech integration specialist or half of a special ed coordinator?
Yes, and the answer is different for individual positions. The literacy coaches, I would argue, need to be full-time, and in fact, and I'm pretty sure Dr. Keene would agree with me on this, we would rather have both of the positions over one of the positions. To move into the school, it would make more sense to be able to support the 2 people at the same time and support the whole school than to bring one literacy coach and only be able to support grade 5. I think that there is going to be there's going to be an efficiency in bringing new people on together. There's going to be an efficiency in training those 2 people together. And I think that we would have a fuller impact on the building if we were supporting all teachers. Remember, in Baldwin, all of the team teachers are teachers of English language arts. And so we would want to be supporting all of them and not dividing that school. So The reason for them being bundled together is because of implementation. And when we look at the budget, we're trying to be realistic about resources, financial resources, but also our resources and our ability to be able to implement the things that we're suggesting in this budget. Those two are very close together. I wouldn't say that that is a hard ranking. I think that my reason for that is that the technology integration specialist is an attempt to support all teachers in the district. That's a position that could come in at half-time, but I think that one person isn't enough, and I think that half of a position would be not nearly enough. I think that that's a request that, as we build that position, you'll see future requests, because just as we're asking for more coaches, because the coaching model is in fact successful and is showing benefits, I anticipate that that model would be successful and would show benefits. The math position, the way that we have envisioned it at Adams, would need to be full-time to be supportive. Of all of them, I think the position that might most open itself to a partial position, a half-time position, would be the administrative position. I'll continue to be enthusiastic in my support of this position. When we're looking at 2 of our 3 important initiatives this year, supervision evaluation and the development of our local special ed capacity, I believe to do those things well, we have to have the right amount of people to do those things well. But I do recognize that administrative increases are challenging, and to say that we were going to add a half-time administrator to work with the special education programming that we've identified this year, and to help with the burden of the administration of the new evaluations. Increasing our administrative team by half a position is still an increase, and it would still be a benefit, and it would help us move forward. I don't know that I wouldn't be back asking to continue to grow that position, but that is probably the one that opens itself the most to the idea of taking a half step and maybe coming back and taking the rest of the step later. And if we were to talk about a half position there, then that would certainly adjust my priority ranking as well. If reducing that position by half and accepting a number of the other reductions that I show higher in the list allowed us to insulate the technology integration specialist and the literacy coaches, then I would see that as a positive compromise and still provide what I think is a boldly forward-looking budget.
What would you project the cost on half, 55,000?
Yeah, I'd probably want to hold 55 or 60,000, and then we would work at creating a 0.5 administrative position that will it would limit the pool that we might see. Filling a half-time administrative position generally means finding somebody who has the ability to work half-time, which is not a lot of people who are in education administration, or it means finding somebody who's beginning an administrative career and would have a shared position where they taught part of their responsibility and had administrative duties for part of their responsibility, and that is an opportunity. In fact, it's a good opportunity to help grow our own internal leadership, and so that might present an opportunity for somebody who's looking to move into an administrative position, and here's a way to develop some of those skills. And I have to say that I think working with Mrs. Brown in the special education office is going to be a very exciting opportunity in the next few years.
The technology integration specialist was considered for last year's budget and ultimately left out. Is that right?
So were the literacy coaches.
I think the literacy coaches were left out even before they got to you, but they were considered last year as well. Those were deferred from last year. The original plan was to implement those 2 positions last year.
I'd like to speak in favor of the technology specialist. When Barbara and I came on the board 7 years ago, these schools were using IBM 360s, which are ready for the Smithsonian Museum of Technology, and we've invested probably more than $1 million in technology in those 7 years, which was a great thing. It's brought us where we almost need to be. However, that kind of rapid development left some teachers, according to what I hear, behind, and that they're not using the technology to the best of its ability. And therefore, we really need to have somebody to work with the teachers, just as we have the literacy coaches working with the teachers in literacy. We need somebody to work with the teachers in technology so that they're using the equipment to the best of its ability.
I agree with everything you said.
So do I.
Ms. Trudeau has got her calculator out. Am I right that if we, I should explain what the bus renewal is, by the way. We've had a contract with a particular company for the last 5 years, it's even 3, isn't it? No, I'm sorry, I skipped the question.
Yeah.
I thought that she and I were doing the same thing, but let me just say what the bus contract is. We've had a contract with STA for the last 3 years, or 5 years, and we went out to bid, we had a full process, got a bunch of bids. STA was the low bidder, then they sounded like they really wanted the business. And we've had, I think, a reasonably good working relationship with them over the last 5 years. They have been responsive. They've changed management when we raised some concerns. They have proposed a renewal of the existing contract at an annual increase of 1.5% a year for a 5-year contract. And what they would like in exchange for that is they would like us not to go out to bid. Now, we are really pretty aggressive on the board here about bidding. Bidding, has led to some really good results for us, especially in the special ed transportation area, where we broke up the routes and bid out each route separately. From looking around, we're in a point where we're really trying to get some data on what's happening in other districts, but we're a little bit concerned right now that if we go out to bid, the numbers may get worse, because 1.5% is significantly lower than anything else we've heard about. And we think that we don't want to lead the company to think that to see if they can find greener pastures, if you will, that there's some other town that they can go out to bid with and try to get a better rate from than Guilford. I think they like the business in Guilford. I think, we have the bus lot is convenient, and I think, it's generally good. So anyway, we're talking about that. And if we do that, then if we do, the amount of money that we put into next year's budget was actually in excess of the amount that STA is proposing to do it for, so we'd be able to save $25,000 from next year's budget. Although I suppose we shouldn't tell them that we had another $25,000 in the budget, but yeah, it is a little late.
That not going up to bill cost you some money.
Yeah, well, so anyway, we're talking about that. It's not, not bidding is something we don't like. On the other hand, it would be pretty uncomfortable if we came back here in 3 months and said, well, guess what, we went out to bid and STA pulled out, and
there goes the technology specialist.
Well, yeah, and so anyway, we're going to do the best we can on that. But if we assume that that's going to happen and we build in the lower number, that's $25,000. The site improvement reduction, in Mr. Ireland's absence, we can say that would not be unanimous, but the site improvement line, if you took out $25,000, if you took out the 3 paras plus health benefits, and if you made the special ed coordinator a half-time position, if I've done it right, and I'm not sure I have, the increase would be exactly 3%, I think.
It's pretty close, yeah.
Yeah, we'll be savings of $190,000.
Something like that. So anyway, look, we're not going to vote tonight anyway.
Right.
But just, that's the kind of scale we're talking about.
And we can certainly detail that and have that on paper for all of you on Monday evening to see exactly what we just discussed and what it looks like in the bottom, all the numbers and the percent.
And other alternatives, if you will. Because I think one of the things that I think we'd like to hear from you about is why are there other things in here that you have not recommended, that didn't make your list, and if so, why? If not, why? Like, for example, you know, the second largest line in the budget is the health benefits line. Now, in Mr. Potashny's absence, I understand that you know, he fought us very hard on not reducing that line, and this year it's really one of the lowest increases, I think, since I've been on the board anyway. Is this the most? Is this number conservative? Is it realistic? What, you know, what was the process? I don't think we need an answer necessarily tonight, but is there any room in that number? Considering especially that we do have some fund balance, if you will, built up.
Right, in that regard, just to go through the numbers and make sure that I think everything is covered by contracts and that we're above, we're covering anybody who's 30 hours or more. But the Affordable Care Act that got passed is the new cutoff of that is 30 hours a week to then be eligible for health benefits. So to make sure there's no additional people that we have that would need to be added in, validate.
Although I think most of that has already been in effect.
That's in contract.
Right, I believe so, but I would say it's just a double check because it's affecting businesses big time that dropping down to that from where a cutoff of 35 hours a week, for example, is more common in terms of health benefits.
We can certainly double check that number and report out on Monday about our confidence in that number. I will point out that early on in this process this year, I was being fairly aggressive about the medical benefits line and about exploring the opportunities to enter into cooperative purchasing with other surrounding districts. I insisted on meetings with Learn. I insisted on meetings to look into some of the collaboratives, and the fact was we couldn't get a better rate by joining into a cooperative purchasing than staying on our own. I think long run, if you want to look at long-term predictability in savings, joining a cooperative is probably going to be a smart thing to do, but this year we couldn't beat the number that we had. It is, I think the medical benefits individually is below 2%. So we'll certainly double check it, but I wouldn't say that it's an overly conservative number, limiting the idea of taking from the reserve.
Well, right, and recognizing that we got ourselves in a hole a few years ago, right, by not being thoughtful
pretty
enough
jealous
about
of our reserve right
now. Well, no, but
I'd like to take a look at, or you folks take a look at, just to validate on the transportation situation, the gallonage that we're using for fuel, and there are other things that STA can work with us on that would help reduce the actual gallonage. The percentage is down, and the price per gallon on the contract is down, but still that's an area where a small savings of a percentage of SART fuel is a lot of gallons we're using and could have some impact of tens of thousands of dollars potentially there, whether it's idling potential, which there's a rule on school buses idling that shouldn't be anyway, but where our routes are, we've tried hard to try and not have stops that are too close together. I know I filed buses that they're closer together than what the stuff was printed when the schedule went out, and what the adaptation was for personal situations, or whether it's just a convenience. The driver's a nice guy and a nice gal, and stops 100 feet apart as opposed to having it be one stop and the kids be more friendly. So safety issues are obviously in stops as well to be cognizant of.
We have required of STA that they include a computer router in the contract renewal. That computer package, that software package will be part of the renewal. I have in other school districts been able to use that software to look at routing and look at stops, and we have been able to reduce stops and project savings because of reduced idle time. It also reduces the carbon emissions, and so there's a lot of positive. It also becomes challenging when you take a large school district. We had projected that we could reduce 90 stops, and that opens up a different conversation, and it comes to what what people are used to. It comes to safety, it comes to convenience, and so, yes, there might be a savings there. It's not something that we've calculated into this budget, but we could certainly go back and look at our fuel figures again and report back to you on Monday on those as well.
Thank you.
Are there other areas we should ask the administration to be prepared to talk about Monday, you think? If you do, we can communicate by email and get any...
I'd also offer that if there's something that comes up between now and Monday, if you just wanted to email a concern, I'd be happy to bring other responses if there's other things that pop up after we adjourn tonight and if there's other questions.
I just have, it's not a expense, but it's a sort of income. We currently are budgeting that we would get from the state of Connecticut through the excess cost grant, $630-some-odd-thousand. And we're budgeting for 13-14, $1,032,000, which is a significant jump, which reflects the jump that we are spending for tuition, because it's a percentage of that. Every time that I open my computer or the newspaper, I hear about how the state of Connecticut is bankrupt. So how real is this number?
We actually did double check this figure, and we do believe that this is an accurate figure. It continues to be budgeted on a projection of the state meeting only 75% of their obligation to us in excess cost. We're not counting on full reimbursement. We've checked with other business directors and other districts around the state. Most folks are budgeting 65 to 75%, and the state has not given us indications that that is an area where they intend to make reductions. We do continue to believe that it's a reasonable projection. I wouldn't guarantee it, but we think it's a reasonable projection.
Write yourself a note, though, to ask Senator Meyer about that.
Absolutely.
Representative Whitlis.
This is budgeted at 75%?
That would be 75% of their share based on the excess cost formula. And so we ran the actual formula for students that we project to be outplaced next year and took 75% of what we knew we would be owed, and that's the figure that we budgeted and netted out of the tuition costs.
You mentioned we received 77% last year?
Yes.
Yes.
Again, John's not here, but I know we're talking primarily about the budget, there are bonding issues.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about that, sure.
And I believe you had to receive for review at the last Board of Ed meeting, full Board of Ed meeting. I'm not sure how many people had a chance to look at the bonding list that was passed out there, but I can go over briefly.
Go ahead. Absolutely.
We have an updated list following last night's conversation?
Yeah, that's okay. And there were some discussions at the facility subcommittee meeting last night also that I think may be some minor changes in the amount as well as sort of the way it's allocated. But certainly for the board or anybody else, I think we'll have a full discussion next Monday, and I think at that point we actually have to vote on the timeline to get to the Board of Finance and onto the public. So the two issues that we discussed in some detail last night, one were the security upgrades throughout the district, and this is, I think, as Dr. Freeman mentioned, there's, and I think Keith also, in response to Newtown, there's been renewed interest in making sure that the physical needs of our buildings are as good as we can get them, understanding that's not a complete protection. And I think that the main thing, and you could probably talk more in depth about this, because I think you were actually looking at it, was looking at the entrances to these buildings. What was the name of that type of entrance that you're talking about?
A Sally Port entrance. Mr. Bowden and Mr. Gurnham and I, after attending the statewide symposium, toured the entrances of all the schools. The best advice that we're receiving now is that the entrance to the building be constructed in such a way that you control visitor access to the building and physically direct all visitors to the building into the main office, so that even when a doorbell is pressed and the buzzer is activated, that you don't just enter into the main hallway of the building, you enter into the main office where you can be addressed and welcomed and ID checked if necessary, and your intentions and purposes in the building clarified. So we are designing our new high school to have such an entrance, and we are looking at the ability to retrofit the existing schools to have such an entrance. This placeholder of $250,000 would not allow us to do all 6 of the remaining schools. The fact is, some of our schools would be fairly easily renovated to function in such a way. If you think of Lakes School, you could picture where the foyer stands, and it would be this simple swapping out of a window set to a door set, and it would allow that sort of access. This building and Jones would be far more complicated because the foyer and the office are actually not adjacent to each other. So we are looking at making those sorts of changes to all of our buildings so that the front entrance would be more easily monitored and more strictly controlled. We could still be welcoming, but we could more strictly control access. So this figure that you see, which was not here the last time the full board saw this bonding request, it's the second largest item in this bonding request, would allow us to begin moving in that direction and making those modifications to our schools.
I think, the schools that were identified as fairly easy fixes were Lake, Sleep, and Baldwin, with the high school coming online with some pretty good security features. And I think that one of the issues we run into in facilities in general is that you sort of have the initial expenditure for architecture fees in order to delineate the project and really get better understanding of how much you have to spend to get it done. And I think we did have a motion last night to expend some of the space renewal bonding money for architectural fees to try to delineate that a little bit better, but that probably won't be back in time for this bonding. So whether $250,000 is enough, too much, or too little was some discussion last night. I think it's a reasonable start, and it could probably accomplish what we need to at Lake, Sleep, Baldwin, but may not be enough for the entire district, so I want people to understand that. The other issues, to go through from the top, envelope is something we've really focused a lot on the facilities subcommittee. If you have problems with your envelope, we've got problems with heat efficiency and issues with sustainability. So we're looking at we're looking at design engineering for Adams, and that's a pretty major project down the line. But in order to figure out the expenditure for that, we're looking at $30,000 to figure that out. We've got estimates on Cox. So that's the major expenditure in this bond on envelope, which is really to redo all the single pane windows that have been there in Cox, and that's $982,000. Sidewalk at Baldwin, we've spoken about that. The one on the left as you drive down that long driveway needs to be repaired. Wiring upgrades, phone and paging system. We talked about security upgrades. And then space renewal was the other area that we talked about a fair amount last night. The major space renewal issue that wouldn't fit into the amount that we have remaining in the space renewal bond is the replacement of the music equipment storage units in this building, which I think are clearly in need of repair. Initially, we had renovations to the bathrooms at Jones as a bonding issue, but there are about $113,000 left in the space renewal bond from 2 years ago, and there's certainly more than enough space renewal projects to spend that on. But I think the one that came to the top of the list was the renovations to bathrooms, and what we decided or recommended from the facilities subcommittee last night was to allocate a certain amount of money, which we estimated to be about $50,000, to design and engineering for future projects. And that is something that we've gotten into the habit of doing, which I think is smart, which is to set aside some money to do the engineering and architecture so that we understand what the cost would be going forward. And I think Mr. Narkowski's here and spoke at the district leadership team, for example, about issues at Baldwin at the windows. And if we're looking 2 years down the line, having some money to figure out what the needs are there and expend on the architecture for that makes sense. So I think we are actually still in deficit in terms of facilities needs in the district based on what we've spent historically. But this seemed to be a reasonable compromise in terms of what we need to do, what we can afford to do at this point. So I think the facilities subcommittee was unanimous in recommending this coming forward. Certainly open to questions from the public or district leadership, and there's a little bit of time to think about it before next Monday. So.
I think the other point is that we've often talked about the requirement for a facilities needs assessment, to have an outside organization come in and tell us what the entire district needs and what the priorities are for repair, replacement, and so on. And that's in progress, but it's not going to happen until after the budget gets presented to the voters. But for next year, in the next budget cycle, we should have some fairly objective data as to what needs to be fixed and what needs to be replaced and what needs to be renewed.
At least have a comprehensive understanding of the deficiencies and have a better idea of how we're prioritizing and what still needs to be done.
Right, yeah.
We've talked about that for a long time. It's just taken longer than we would have liked to get through the process of putting it together. But
I mean, some of the things we'd like to take and put more names to the dollars for the public to better understand, but that's a catch-22 situation, that without the facility needs assessment, we're not the expert to determine which ones really are the best payback in terms of the taxpayer dollars to spend on those particular projects. And whether it's bathrooms in a particular school, classroom renovations, carpet replacement things. And so that's one of the big things that we do need, but the dollars put into the study is going to have to be spent regardless to get the engineering and the architect fees.
Yeah. And some of that, I mean, we're happy to see the line item in the operating budget, because a lot of that stuff really shouldn't be bonded. Carpets and painting and things like that ought to be fixed.
And we're saving long-term money by putting it in the operating budget rather than paying interest and stretching it out over way too long to pay for it.
Okay, are there questions on that? Okay. All right, anything else? Anybody else want to add anything? Administrators, anybody? Please.
Well, point of curiosity, kind of touch facilities. What are the marginal items in the, what's the operating category for facility expenditures that's kind of on the
We have a line identified as site improvement.
Yeah. What are the areas that, if you have the detail, that might be subject to reduction in that?
They tend to be basic maintenance and upkeep items. It's the idea of maintaining the buildings on a regular basis rather than waiting for something to fail and then needing to move into a capital project to replace something that's broken, failed, or completely worn out. So it should be the ideas of regular painting, carpet replacement, tile replacement, properly maintaining stuff.
Perhaps even more important than that are some of the envelope issues, some of this brickwork repointing.
So the site improvement is more the label than it's more physical maintenance.
Yeah, and I mean, to give you some historical perspective on that, I think that was a criticism of the way that the district has expended its money, and you can see why it happens, and it's happening again this year, which is that when you're late in a budget and things aren't working out as well as you'd planned, and aside from cutting personnel, the things that tend to get cut are the physical needs. And so we made a conscious effort last year to increase that item substantially in order to make sure that we're maintaining what we have. We're in the same situation a little bit. I know you've freed up a little bit more of this, but that's the debate we're having tonight is actually not about cutting that back, but actually cutting back the increase. I think the increase
How
is-
much to increase it is the debate,
Right,
right?
because we'd had a 100,000 increase from last year, which is a substantial increase.
Yes, yeah, my
And
initial...
your potential proposal is to cut that increase back 25,000, which would still be a $75,000 increase.
Yes.
I think we're still moving in the right direction regardless of whether we, but I do think it's important to, as best we can, try to protect that so that at least the key things for maintenance, especially on the envelope, are being done and not cut into.
Now, our list that's in the budget book then has tennis courts resurfacing at the high school. We don't do that and let it go, and the tennis team can't play there for continuing years. Paved parking lot next to the basketball courts at Adams. Driveway entrances at Adams need to be redone as you come in. Installation of concrete pad and fence at the garbage and recycling here at Adams. Padding at the end of the gyms here at Adams is another one at Cox. It's fine-tuning and adjusting the heating and AC conditioning system there where the shoulder seasons to have temperatures that are right, and it takes more than what our staff can handle to fine-tune that. Jones, it's block ceiling and office renovation needs. Lakes, stuff cleaning. T111 siding on the portable building has got some rot problems that needs to be replaced. The HVAC system, again, the balancing of that. A fence around the kindergarten playscape for another safety and security issue, that's $5,000. Parking lot at Wheat and upgrades to the playground at Wheat that are district expense. And then district-wise, we talked about construction management software that will help us to take and keep tabs on the projects that are ongoing. Tile and carpet replacement is $110,000. That doesn't go very far when you look at the square footage of the buildings we have, and if you divide, how many years worth of carpet you want to replace each year, and $110,000 still doesn't bite that off very well. Phone system at Lathrop is the last one that we haven't upgraded to bring into keeping with the rest of the schools. Building plans, it's been on our list, I think, for 5 or plus years to scan all the old prints and the as-built drawings so that they're archived properly so we can look things up in the maintenance department and have easy access to those. Exterior building painting of a number of district places, repairs to parking lots and sidewalks throughout the district, and the entrance to Lathrop House needs upkeep for painting.
Yeah, I think it's worth highlighting, last night at the facility subcommittee that 2 leaders of the elite PTO who really spearheaded this fundraising opportunity and raised, a substantial amount of money. They've had the first phase in, they're looking at the second phase, and part of, that budget actually is to help, let's just do the fill around there, which is, I think, $3,000 or so. And, when we've got community members who are putting in $60,000 to, set up a playground, I think that's hopefully something that we can find the money in our budget to do. So.
We're making every effort to make that happen.
Maybe it's stating the obvious, but worth noting that from that list you just read, Mr. Bishop, balancing the HVAC can be, depending on how severe the problem is, that can be a real money saver too.
Absolutely.
Right, energy-wise.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, well, are we done for the evening? You want to deliberate, think a little bit, not deliberate, but think a little bit about it until Monday, and I want to certainly encourage anybody in the public who's got questions or comments. You've heard at least some of the things we're thinking about this evening. I don't think there's any interest at all in the board in cutting back the Bright Connections program. I don't think there's any interest in the board of changing the transition coordinator. I don't think there's much interest in eliminating the math position that I think we all agree is very important. So we've got some things to at least chew on a little bit and see what we can do on Monday. And want to encourage anybody who's got any other questions or thoughts, comments, to get in touch with us, either Dr. Freeman or any of us. And we'll look forward to a productive meeting on Monday, and we will vote then and move forward.
We'll bring responses to the questions that were asked, and thank you again. These have been good conversations.
Thank you. All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.